Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Ashe, always good to see you. Appreciate you and your organization, and I think you try in sometimes difficult situations. I'm going to start with a supposition, and I'm not going to ask you to agree or disagree because I think that you do agree. And if not, feel free to tell me otherwise. But I think we believe that local people, including the states, want to do the right thing when it comes to restoration or protection of species.
Yes, I agree.
And I think we would agree as well that in many cases local populations or the states are capable of taking actions that would protect endangered species.
I agree.
Now, in light of that, we also recognize we have federal mandates and that you have to comply with that. That's your job, is to enforce the federal law and federal regulations. So, and sometimes those two are in conflict. We have an example in my state that we've talked about many times, really for, since I've been in Congress for 3 years now, regarding the prairie dog. Now, we know there's been litigation regarding that. Whether that actual finding for the state is upheld will be seen this summer. But assuming that it's not, that your lawsuit is successful, can you assure us and assure the people in my district that we won't go back to square one with the restoration of the prairie dog, that Utah has demonstrated a capability of protecting the species. They've demonstrated, as I said, a desire to protect the species, and that we can have a partnership there, again, that doesn't take us back to square one and some of the really draconian economic effects of the federal plan.
I think we can, and I want to say thank you for your personal leadership and engagement on this. I think it's made a difference. Like everything, I think we had, people on both sides who were maybe stuck in a bit of a rut on this issue. I think the lawsuit has unfortunately kind of stalled progress, but where we are right now, we're appealing that decision. We expect to win. But what we're working on in the meantime is a general conservation plan. And I think with continued help from the state of Utah, and I'll see Greg Sheehan later today, actually, at a meeting in Pittsburgh, and we'll be talking to Greg about how we can best position ourselves so that we in the state of Utah and hopefully the counties down in the range of the prairie dog will be positioned to work together to come out of that in a positive way. And so we are committed to moving forward with the prairie dog, to working with those local communities. We need a little bit of help, and again, your engagement has been a very positive influence on that, and I hope my engagement has been on the Fish and Wildlife Service side. I think we can continue to move in a good direction.
Well, I hope so, and I appreciate that. I mean, again, it has just devastating impacts on this small community for something they had very little ability to control because it was so mandated by federal policy. Shifting gears quickly, if I could, towards the introduction of the Mexican wolf into Utah, or the Fish and Wildlife Service proposing to place Mexican wolves in Utah. And again, stating for the record, but something I know, and that is this species isn't native to Utah. In fact, and you seem to indicate maybe that's not true. I'd be interested if that's not the case, because my understanding is that 90% of the habitat is native to Mexico, with some, incursion into some of the southern states, but not into Utah. This at the same time, we just had a conversation regarding the gray wolf.
Right.
And it would seem to me problematic to have the introduction of one species protected while we're trying to delist another species. And again, our concern being that it's not native to my state. And I guess I would have two questions on this. The first one, I just think hypothetically, are there other potential species that are not native to the U.S. that we would have a responsibility to protect? I mean, would there be a species in Australia or New Zealand or some other place that they may not be doing a job of protecting it, and we would accept that responsibility? Because that seems like an incredibly difficult thing to ask, but it may be the case here in with the Mexican wolf. And I'd ask you to respond to that if you would, please. So that
Well, the Endangered Species Act does protect foreign species, and so things like elephant and rhino and tiger, and so we use the U.S. influence and in trade to ensure that our actions are not undermining conservation in foreign countries. That the Mexican wolf is an example of a species that
That's cross-border.
that goes cross-border. And so historically, when you think about wolves, what we have to think about, because we think about a landscape where we basically extirpated wolves, because we did. And now we're bringing them back. And so historically, in the U.S., you had different subspecies of wolf, and they intermix. It was what biologists call a metapopulation. And so those wolves there, you had mixing zones, between the range. I think it's probably correct that the what we now call the Mexican wolf, their principal range was in Mexico. Their range extended into the U.S., into Arizona and New Mexico to some extent. They probably ranged up into and intermixed with what we now call Rocky Mountain wolves. And where that mixing zone was, we really don't know. And so as we craft a recovery plan, the thing we need to do is we need to sit down and we need to understand the science better of wolves. We are not proposing to reintroduce wolves into Utah.
The Mexican wolf, isn't it?
The Mexican wolf, well, any wolf, really. And we are, but what we need to do is we need to sit down, and what we are doing is sit down with the states to develop a recovery plan and do that cooperatively. And what I've asked the states is don't come with preconditions. I'm not coming with any preconditions. You shouldn't come with any preconditions. We should look at the science of the wolf, and right now what we have is an agreement with to move toward a population of 325 wolves, up to 325 wolves, which would be south of Interstate 40. And we have an agreement that if wolves go north of Interstate 40, that we will go and recover them. And so that's where we are today, and we're asking Colorado and Utah to sit down with us, along with New Mexico and Arizona, and develop a long-term recovery plan.
Well, and I appreciate that approach, and as does, I think, my state, and we certainly want to do that with you. I appreciate, though, that right now your plan isn't to the proposal for introduction of Mexican wolf in Utah. That's appreciated, so thank you. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Sure. I don't think wolves in Utah